Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 16th, 2021 Planning Board meeting for the town of Litchfield. Would you all please stand, those in the room, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We have a quorum this evening. We do not have any alternates, so I'll start with the roll call of members. Michael Croto, Chair. And you can state your role as an ex officio, and we'll talk about that.
Kimberly Queenan, Selectman's Rep.
Kate Stevens, member.
Betty, member. And Stevens, member.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. And welcome, Jay, being on remote. Before I start, just open it up to public input on non-agenda items. Are there any items on the not on the agenda this evening that the public would wish to comment on? Okay, he doesn't appear to be. So hearing none, I'll close input on non-agenda items. Before we start this evening, a couple things. As you know now, Kim has become the selectman's rep, or the ex officio member of the board. She's actually going to stay on as ex officio member. She also officially sent in her letter of resignation as a planning board member. So with that said, that leaves open a position for the vice chair of the planning board. And I think tonight, before we get started, it might be advisable to see if there are any people who may be interested in the vice chair position. That would also mean, too, that Curtis Sampson, who is an alternate, would move up to regular member. And I guess that would leave open a position for alternate member if we decide to send out a notice of, of possible planning board candidates. I did get an email from Curtis. He is going to try to stay with the regular meeting schedule. He did say that his work schedule was making it difficult for him to attend. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, I guess, and see if he continues to be part of this. But with that said,
Hey, Mike.
yes.
Did you hear that he is on the phone?
Oh, he is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Was
if
that the
cut out
number
your
167?
phone number.
Oh, okay. I'm
Yeah,
very
correct.
sorry.
I am on the phone.
Hi, Curtis. How are you?
Hello.
We were wondering who the number was, so we didn't know if it was someone from the public, but thank you. Okay, great.
Yep.
So how would you feel, Curtis, about moving to the regular member position if we decide to elect a new vice chair?
Yeah, I'm able to do that. Things with work have been resolved, so I can make that commitment.
Okay. All right. So I'll ask the board, is there anybody who would be interested in the vice chair position? Anybody who wants to nominate someone for the vice chair position this evening?
Mr. Chair, I would nominate Kate Stevens.
Okay.
I would second that nomination.
I have a motion and I have a second to nominate Kate Stevens as the next vice chair of the Litchfield Planning Board. do we have discussion on that motion? All right.
Just have to say, I appreciate it, and, I'd be honored to.
Okay, great. Well, I think you would do a great job. And with that, I have a motion. I have a second. Just further discussion? All right. All those in favor of nominating Kate Stevens as the new vice chair of Litchfield Planning Board, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, those opposed? Abstained? All right, motion passes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0,
Okay.
0.
What's that?
Congrats. Congratulations.
Thank you, Rob.
Ron, Curtis, I don't know.
So 1, 2.
He's an alternate, so he didn't vote, so it's
5.
5, yeah. 1, 2.
Oh, and Curtis, so.
But did you didn't appoint Curtis yet?
Oh, that's true. So I guess we'll do that.
5,
So 5, 0, 0.
okay.
And then, Curtis, if you want, we can nominate you tonight as a regular member of the planning board. So, I would entertain a motion to do so.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. Do I have discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of nominating Curtis Sampson to the to being a regular member of the planning board for the town of Litchfield, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained, motion passes
Still 5.
5, 0, 0.
Now, do you want to appoint Curtis for tonight? You didn't appoint him to vote tonight.
Oh, right, because I didn't realize he was on the phone. But we voted him in as a regular member now.
The selectmen have to do that.
What's that?
Selectmen have to do that.
Oh, so it would be a motion then to send to the Board of
Recommend,
Selectmen. Okay, all right. So I'm gonna just amend that motion that we recommend Curtis Sampson to be recommended to the Board of Selectmen to become a full-time member of the planning board. So I'll entertain that motion.
So moved.
And a second.
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 All right. Discussion. All right. All those in favor of recommending Curtis to the Board of Selectmen to become a regular member of the planning board, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstained? All right. Motion passes 5, 0, 0. Okay. All right. Congratulations, everybody. And looking forward to working with all of you. And as always, and congratulations to you, Kim, again, on your new position as Selectman's rep. And thank you for continuing on with us. And we'll look forward to having you as always.
Great.
So
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. The first item of business this evening is the master plan update. And to that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay Minkara. So Jay.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. I did just want to note, though, if it wasn't obvious, but Curtis can vote because we are down to members now. Not like we have anything weighty to vote on, but nevertheless.
What was
All
this?
right, let me see if I
He
can.
can vote if he's appointed for tonight.
Right.
Right. All right, I'm going to minimize my screen because I'm not seeing what I want to share first. All right. Share. There we go. So just to give you a bit of an update as to where we are, can everybody see what I just shared?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So progress, I will say, has been a bit slower than I would have liked. Where we are overall on this chapter is we've updated the maps. From the last master plan, we have updated most of the data or gathered most of the data that we need. So my goal is to have a draft for you for our second meeting in March to review, and then hopefully we can have some good discussion. A couple of things that were hanging out there. I've never succeeded in getting a copy of the plan for the town hall complex. So it's something I was hoping for, because that really seemed to factor into a lot of the comments that we've heard are really around building that. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and discuss it, maybe try to come up with some visuals, but I think I've kind of given up on getting that plan. And I think we have to go with the assumption that there was a plan that did contemplate multiple facilities on this site, even if I can't show it. Anybody happens to come across it in the interim, though, I would really welcome it. The other thing I would just throw out, and if people who have long memories can help, I'm thinking of you, Joan, in particular. The concept of restoring swimming at Dara Pond also came up through our process, and going back, I can't figure out when it was closed to swimming or why. It did appear in older master plans as a town beach, and then it disappeared. I've gone through past documents. I can't find any discussion as to why or what. So anybody who can point me in the right direction, figuring out why Dara Pond was close to swimming, I would welcome that. I'll keep digging. So I don't know, Joan, if you have any memory on that.
I can't
I don't wanna
recall
put you on the
why
spot,
it was
though.
closed, but I'll check around.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I know it was a long time ago, but that's just one loose end I'd like to tie up. Otherwise, I think I'm ready to finalize the chapter. The one thing I was just hoping to do tonight, and it doesn't have to be definitive, but I wanted to just get some feedback. We have a chapter in our master plan that is the vision, goals, and implementation. And what we've historically done is every time we've updated a chapter, we've reviewed this chapter for updates. And when I went to take a look at what we have, you can see it's 2017, but actually the goals for community facilities were last updated in 2002. So needless to say, it's been a while. So what I wanted to just have a chance to do a little bit this evening. Again, doesn't have to be definitive. I'm going to come back to everybody with a draft next month. But I wanted to get a sense of, do most of these still make sense? I certainly think a lot of them do. There might be a couple that maybe we don't think make sense anymore. And very importantly, there might be some things that we're missing. So what I did was just, first of all, the way it's organized is there's the overall vision statement, or statements. And so here I just highlighted those overall vision statements that jumped out at me. Maybe there's something I missed, but jumped out at me as being related directly to community facilities. So I just thought I'd go through some of these and then, make comments as we go along. Basically, I don't want to wordsmith, but kind of again, are these on the right track? Are these things that we should keep in the plan, or are there things that we should change? And then again, is there anything missing? Starting off with under the overall vision, foster and enhance a sense of community spirit in Litchfield. Probably hard to argue against that one, but nevertheless, that's. And then continue the expansion of town resources to make them more readily available throughout the town. 3, I thought, made a lot of sense. 5, I just wondered, what that necessarily means. I think it's true for some things. On the other hand, we've also made an effort to consolidate, town facilities such as town hall, police station, fire in one location. So, again, we don't have to make any decisions tonight, but I wondered if that's still an overall vision or goal. Just kind of moving on down. Again, continuing preserve forest blocks, fields, farmland, drinking water quality, provide an opportunity for a variety of passive and active conservation recreational uses. This one just jumps out at me as very consistent. With generally the trend in the master plan and in other sections. And then finally, control and stabilize taxes required for schools and town government through responsible budgeting, which utilizes impact fees and control of capital expenditures. Doing so requires careful planning to balance access to amenities with taxes and maintaining community character and design with opportunities for economic development. That's quite a mouthful. Nevertheless, probably hard to argue with. Although again, we can always wordsmith it. Maybe that's too many thoughts in one sentence, but moving on from that, and maintain and enhance the quality of education in local schools through sound planning and adequate facilities. That seemed very consistent with everything that I've seen so far. This is really the same goal we've already seen. These are the same goals we've already seen. A little bit different, provide an education that meets local expectations and state guidelines for assisting and future residents of the community, and continuing education so these individuals are likely to become active and productive members of society. Again, we don't need to wordsmith. The only thing that jumped out at me with this statement was that it wasn't terribly aspirational. Provide an education that meets local expectations and state guidelines. There was it's not excellent in education, but nevertheless, I felt that this was a little bit underwhelming in terms of a vision, but that was just my thought. I'd probably enhance that a little bit. Encourage capital investments that result in long-term savings for the municipality. That seems to make sense. And again, those were all overall. These are the goals that were specific to community facilities. So again, maintain high levels of quality in all town services. Pretty hard to argue with. Provide for fiscal stability of the community by attempting to avoid adverse fiscal impacts from new development where reasonably feasible. Again, pretty straightforward. Provide cost-effective community facilities and services, including but not limited to the following, for town residents and businesses consistent with both demand and the town's ability to pay. Okay. Provide community for services that are equal or better to than acceptable minimum level of services and accepted minimum standards. Come back to that thought in a moment. Require new developments to pay a proportional share of public facility and road improvement costs made necessary by that particular development. We certainly strive to do that. Expand the town's parks and recreational facilities to meet or exceed accepted minimum. I think something dropped off on this, but again, I got to come back to that accepted minimum point in a moment. Encourage the extension of water, sewer, and gas lines within Litchfield. Certainly, there's been a big effort towards water. I just throw out there as a question, is it still a goal of ours to extend sewer in particular, as well as gas lines? And it may be, but I'm throwing that out as a question for the board. Consider in all planning actions the property tax ramifications to the residents of the town, keeping in mind that high property taxes result in less economic diversity and a disproportional burden on the town's lower income and elderly residents, and negate, I think maybe negates, many of the goals contained in this plan. So, okay, a lot packed into that sentence. Provide for public access, use, and enjoyment of the Merrimack River through enhanced buffers, trails, development, protection of existing and future public access for watercraft. So since the time of this writing, of course, Litchfield did achieve public access to the Merrimack River. So is this still a goal? Are we looking for additional access? And again, I just throw that out. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or comments on any of these. I guess before I jump out, I did say that I would go back to this. A couple of areas where we talk about acceptable minimum level of service, and again, accepted minimum here. My tendency lately has been to use various standards for facilities, whether it's how many police officers per 1,000 or how many feet of library shelf per 1,000 or volumes or et cetera. Those may have a value as a gauge and for something comparative, but I think I have found that it's really, really hard to objectively apply standards like that from one community to the next. And so I have a hesitancy to say, we're striving to meet a particular standard. I think that's something that we can look at and think about. But end of the day, what is it that the community wants, and what does the community feel is an adequate level of service is really what matters. So that's the only reason why I highlighted that. But at any rate, I just throw it open to, does anybody have any thoughts on these? Is there anything that we might want to change, or anything we might want to add, or anything we might want to eliminate as we move forward?
Anybody have any questions for Jay?
If not, what I would plan on doing is just basically incorporating these into the updated draft. And then we could, certainly this isn't your last stab, so you will definitely have more opportunities to look at these again, and we can revisit them and we can wordsmith them.
Yeah, the first things that jump out at me is, like you said, expansion of community facilities. It sounds to me more like it's not necessarily the expansion, but the maintenance. Like make a larger focus on maintaining either the facilities we have to a high standard or to the community standard. That seems to be the central theme in a lot of issues lately, is that the facilities they don't necessarily need to be expanded, but they need to be taken care of. And
Good point.
maybe some way of, like you said, instead of like some kind of minimum standard, maybe it's something like balancing comprehensive budgeting and the community expectations of quality. It just sounds a little nicer, I guess, rather than just saying like, let's try to meet the bare minimum.
Yeah.
That's just my first thoughts off the top of my head. I'm sure we'll come up with more as we get deeper into it.
Sure. Okay, I like those thoughts though. All right, I can take a stab at massaging a little, and then I'll incorporate it into the next draft, and then we can take a look again. Anybody else have any comments on these?
So what are you cross-referencing to put in here? We did a survey on the community facilities, right? And
Yes.
and all of that. So you're taking the results of that and trying to make sure it's still in line with this, or did we accomplish any of this already? And right. So that's what.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking at the survey. Not only the survey, I'm also looking at what has been since 2002.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other changes that have happened? So I would say I'm looking at both of those things definitely.
Okay, so when we go off in this week, and we could compare them that way.
Yes, absolutely, and also just our knowledge of what the community really seems to want. What's the community really willing to support? And so, yeah, it's the survey, but it's also just as you're out and about. I mean, you have a sense of what people in the community are looking for. I mean, I think, just as an example, that we've seen recently, that clearly part of it was due to COVID. We've seen a huge, demand and increase in interest in accessing trails in the town. So that's just something that I think we are aware of, whether it shows up in a survey or it shows up in any standards. That's just something that I think we've experienced. So that's going to be a part of it too, is just what are we actually seeing in the community.
And our community design chapter touched on some of this as well, with the
Yes.
parks and the buildings and yeah.
Yep, it definitely did.
Okay, so we can cross-reference that.
Without question. And as it should, different chapters in the master plan, intersect each other. So, there's things that came out of transportation that, make a difference here too, as well as land use. So most definitely we can cross-reference this with other things.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things too, one of the big changes in the town has been the issue of water quality, especially with the PFOA debacle and the problems that people are having with their wells in town. I don't know if there's a way to address that, or that part of this, part of the discussion. I think that's something that we should look at, because I think it's kind of important in terms of there's been a lot of change in the way we perceive the idea of having, clean water or drinking water or whatever in town. But, not just us, but other communities. I think Merrimack, from my understanding, Merrimack is suing St. Gobain now for something to do with the whole issue. But anyway, irrespective, I think this is a great segue into how we, as a town, look at things. Another point too is that comes out of that survey as well, is the community center. A lot of the buildings, our facilities in town, police, fire, the library, a lot of those facilities, there seems to be an interest in putting some sort of town center for Litchfield, or having a town center for Litchfield. So those are just things that come to mind. I don't know. I don't know how we want to look at that. Certainly water quality is important, and I think we should continue to support that. But just things have changed a little bit for us here in town. We rely on more of our people are relying now on public water versus aquifer and so forth. But I guess there's a little bit of both in that. So
Yeah, the two issues are important to include.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I couldn't agree with you more about the water. I'm talking on a personal basis as well, because my neighbors and I are part of that contaminated well, and it is such a pain to have to go out and get a delivery left out in the driveway, and those things are pretty heavy. So yes, I agree with you 100%. Okay. I just have one recommendation. I think it's a simple fix. It was not a fix, but I think an update. I think the very last item, number 9 on community facilities, I think as was already mentioned, we've already addressed access to the Merrimack, and I continue would just about do it for that number 9.
Yeah, I wondered that as well. Can we drop off 9 because we've achieved it, or is there something more that we want to accomplish?
Well, I guess that's a good question. I know we have access for the local residents now from 3A. We have that boat launch. But there may be other opportunities for access. I know that's an ongoing discussion with the Lower Merrimack Local River Advisory Committee all the time, that we talk about, is there, the Heritage Trail, and is there more, can we get more public access to the Merrimack River for the public? Certainly Morris Falls, you have access to the river as well. You have access here at the Old Town Center, at the muster field. So I guess, that's an interesting, to look at it in terms of, do we have enough access, or do we want to just encourage more access? I don't know. It's a good point though.
Right. And again, we can think about that. We don't have to make a decision now.
Yeah. Okay.
Are we going to focus on certain sections of this, Jay? Do you want to focus on the whole document, this whole chapter, or are we going to focus?
Yeah.
Okay.
The whole community facilities chapter, yes. So that's going to encompass, police, fire, town hall services, library, schools, parks and recreation, conservation, I mean, everything, solid waste, it'll be all of those things in the chapter. So it's a pretty hefty chapter.
This chapter 1, the vision, goals, and implementation, right? This is the one you're talking about?
No, I was talking about the community facilities chapter.
Okay.
The reason why I bring this up is that this chapter contains the vision and goals for every single section of the master plan.
Mhm.
So we always have to, when we're updating a chapter of the master plan, we have to consider whether we're going to make any revisions to these. So we will wind up amending this chapter once we're done with the community facilities chapter. But we want to make sure that these are aligned.
Yep. Well, because when we talked about water, natural resources, that
Right.
chapter is all, in there too.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, and clearly the water issue is a big one, and I know there are some legislative initiatives that are underway, at least insofar as Merrimack is concerned.
Mhm.
That's an aside.
Okay.
All right, so
Right.
if nothing else, I mean, again, I'm open to comments, but my plan will be for our second meeting in March to come back to you with the draft.
Okay. That
Sounds
sounds
good.
All right, so I'm gonna close this. And so, I mean, I don't know if we want to jump on more formally, but the next area I was going to raise is some possible regulatory changes that we might consider making. And so this kind of came to mind because we've gone through the zoning cycle, and although obviously it still has to go before the voters, and we did seem to have a little bit of a lull with applications. So I thought, well, maybe this is a time to just give some thought to a couple of things that I've had in mind, and then certainly obviously other board members may have some other things. So I thought I'd throw out a few suggestions for some things that were kind of in my tickler, and but again, these are just some thoughts. So if I may, I figured I would go through a couple of these.
sure.
All right, so the first one that jumped out is really, it's fairly straightforward, but we have in our land use regulations, in this, the conditional use permit application form. Again, this is really a very straightforward one, but in looking at this, I noticed that this only contemplates 3 kinds of conditional uses. This building foundation and slab location, conservation and open space subdivision, which we had seen not that long ago, and the aquifer protection district. In 2019, we amended the zoning ordinance to change several special exception requirements from special exceptions to conditional use permits. So there's actually another 15 types of conditional use permits that people can apply for. Obviously pretty significant. And if the ADU ordinance passes, that'll be a 16th. So needless to say, we need to amend this form to address all of those. In looking at that though, adding another 16 to this form is going to be really, really onerous for the way it's structured. So, because again, here you list section and then you list your response, adding another 16 is just going to make this form enormous. So I think it's not a huge deal. It just requires kind of changing the format of the form, so that you're not necessarily exhaustively listing each one. I mean, again, that's not a huge deal, but needless to say, we do need to do it. So I think it's pretty simple and straightforward. So if there's no questions, concerns, or comments on that, I figured I would just take a stab at that. Kate?
Real quick, Jake, were you talking about you would not list the full 16 there that are possible?
I think we could still reference them in the conditional use permit. What I wouldn't do is, I wouldn't list every section of the ordinance of each one of these. I would simply say, list the special exception that you're applying for and the response, rather than putting every single one on here, just because there's so many. We could, I mean, we don't have to do that, but that just jumped out at me because at that point, There'll be 18 listed, 17 listed.
I know that it makes it easier for the person, accepting the form and it makes the form not bulky, but coming at it from somebody, like say if somebody is just not familiar with the zoning ordinances, I think it makes more sense to list the things out that they can check off and make sure like, okay, I definitely don't need this one. I definitely don't need this one. Instead of, because otherwise I think what's going to happen is they'll list the ones that they think they need and maybe miss one or two. And maybe the planning board then doesn't even realize that we missed some. So I think it's a better idea to have them all listed, or maybe like a reference sheet towards the back. And then you can still have it fill in exactly which ones. But I think they do need to be listed in a very easily acceptable place or accessible place for the applicant.
That's a fair point. So maybe what I could do is list them here where it says what you're applying for, list them all, you check the box, but then I won't necessarily repeat them in this section, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Any other comments on this one?
Any questions for Jay?
I was going to move on to, again, these are just ones that were on that I've been thinking about. So I'm going to jump around now. These are subdivision. I am sorry, bear with me. I meant to bring up, you can probably see me as I am going through. I meant to bring up site plan. There we go. Hopefully I'm on site plan, and I am on site plan. So the next one I was going to go to is just one that I've been thinking about for a little while, and I only think about it when it comes up, and then I let it go. Parking standards. So this really first came up. Sometimes I feel like I say this too often, but this first really came up under Mel's. When we were reviewing Mel's, there was an issue about how to calculate the parking standards. And the first issue was, so I'm going to go through this with everybody. I'm not going to go through all of these. But we have our overall parking standards here. And then this is the table in the site plan regulations that says how many parking spaces you need by use. Very typical approach. The first issue and the one that really jumped out as significant is we didn't have a good way of addressing multiple uses on one site that aren't necessarily cumulative. So as an example, if you have I'll just say the Mel's example. Mel's had multiple recreational uses happening on one site, and then they had offices for the facility. So do you calculate the offices for the facility under the office standard? They had storage areas on their site. Do you calculate that as warehouse? Basically, we don't address how to calculate multiple uses on one site. So that's just one area that I think we need to address in the regulations. It doesn't just come into play in complicated sites like Mel's, where there are a lot of different things going on, but it comes into play in, say, a typical shopping center. And today, it's pretty typical to have a different standard for something like a multi-tenant shopping center that addresses the reality that there is a pretty frequent changeover of individual tenants. So you tend to look at that a little bit differently. You don't just add up all the different individual uses, because you recognize that in a large shared parking lot, there is always going to be a back and forth in spaces. So we don't have to come up with that standard now, but that's typically something that we need. So that was one of the issues that jumped out at me. The other issue, though, that jumped out at me is parking standards change over time, because they are developed, by organizations like the American Planning Association, and they tend to look at how is demand changing for different types of uses. So just as a general, I think it makes sense to take a look at these and see how they're really lining up with what we're seeing out there in practice. And there may be some changes that we might want to make based on that. The other one that really jumps out at me, and because it is really so difficult to gauge, is many of these standards are based, in part at least, on the number of employees. Agricultural uses, one space per employee on the largest shift. You know, again, bowling establishment, same thing. You see this really throughout. When it comes to something like square footage, and I guess that's where I'm going, is I lean towards a uniform standard like square footage. So many per square feet, or so many per seat in a restaurant or an auditorium, et cetera. Something that's objectively measurable, because the number of employees is something that shifts over time, and that's generally not something we have access to. We really don't know how many employees typically are working in an establishment. And again, if that establishment changes and becomes something else, that can readily change. Staffing is fluid. So my tendency is so one, again, I think we need to address multiple uses on one site. Two, I think we need to just make sure that these standards are in line with current practice. And then three, my tendency would be to get rid of standards that are based on employees and stick with something that is, you know, objective, whether that's square footage or, again, you know, number of chairs in a barbershop, et cetera. There are also probably some things in here that we need to add in terms of uses that are more common today than might have been when this was put together. There might be some things in here that we might not really need at this point. I don't know that we're ever going to have a marina. Maybe it makes sense to have a standard for one or not. I guess it doesn't hurt, but nevertheless. So I don't know if there's any thoughts on that, but that was kind of one of the areas that I thought I would dive into.
Well, I think that makes sense, especially considering, you know, when you're having something that's a multiple use, where you're using it for different things, at least to have something that you can use to sort of, that wouldn't create confusion, I guess, in trying to determine, you know, what that, how much parking you need and so forth. So I think that's
right.
That makes sense. Does
And
anybody?
then the other one that has jumped out at me, and it's come up a couple of times, and again, forgive me for jumping around so much. I'm going all the way down to page, jump a little bit more. And again, I'm sure there's other things out there. 78. All right, so this is one that just has kind of jumped out at me. We've only had a couple come in under this. Well, I shouldn't say that. We've had a couple of minor site plans. So this section deals with submission requirements for the expedited review of farm buildings and minor site plans. Well, that makes sense to have a section like this, because we know, yes, you can have farm buildings coming in that you know, perhaps don't require a full-blown site plan review in the typical sense. We also have you know, minor site plan changes. So as an example, fairly recently, we had an existing restaurant that wanted to make some fairly minor changes to their site. And, you know, those kinds of things obviously come up. They're going to continue to come up. And so having a section like this, again, it makes sense because you're not always going to need, for some of these minor site plans, minor changes, you're not going to need a fully engineered plan. And that's really typically what these types of sections are trying to address. If you are coming in with something fairly minor, a minor addition to a building, you're changing, you're adding a few parking spaces. Generally, you know, I think many of us would look at that and say, well, you don't need to hire an engineering firm. You don't need to hire a surveyor. You don't have to go through quite that cost. And many of the requirements that we have may not be applicable. Almost certainly by definition, you don't have to do a traffic study if we consider it minor. You probably don't have to address stormwater. There's a lot of those requirements that wouldn't make sense in a scenario like that. However, when you look at this section, clearly this is the intent. We address what it is. It's proposed with a development area of 40,000 square feet or less, habitable structures, etc. So we say what it is. We do exclude farm stands. We have a specific provision here for seasonal or temporary structures for agriculture, which is fine. So again, all this makes a whole lot of sense, but then you get to submission requirements. And the submission requirements say that you first of all, you request an expedited site plan review in writing, that's fine. But then we say that the pre-application requirements of section 130, submission procedures for section 140, and submission requirement for section 150 shall apply for expedited site plan review. So without going through all the effort of going through those sections, basically what we wind up saying here is that everything that applies to a regular site plan also applies to an expedited review. That seems to contradict itself. If we really want it to be expedited, it doesn't make sense to say we have this section and yet you have to meet all of the same requirements. And the only way around that is to request a waiver from every one of those requirements. And that basically means you're going to wind up, if you really want a minor site plan and you want an expedited review, you're going to wind up requesting a waiver of most of the requirements. So what I thought I would at least take a stab at, and obviously this will take, I'm sure we would have a fair amount of discussion around this, is what is it that we really want to see when we talk about a minor site plan? First of all, what do we mean by minor site plan? And secondly, what is it that we really need to see to make a decision on those plans? Again, I threw out some things that I think kind of by definition, you wouldn't need a traffic study. Do you really need stormwater, et cetera? I mean, I'm throwing those out as examples. The section that I thought might even come closest, rather than pouring through all our regulations, to maybe what I think of is something more like, I'm going to zoom all the way up to section 48. I'm page 48. Where am I? And I apologize for zipping around the regs like this. This is where I'm at. No, I'm not. Sorry. These are all the other requirements. These are all the requirements that everybody has to meet. Am I right on my pagination? I am not. I messed up on my pages. Let me go up a little bit more. Apologize. I'm not going to find it. I'm not going to find it right now, so I'm not going to go there. But at any rate, the section that jumped out at me that might come closest is the section on what we require for home occupations, which is a much lower standard. And again, obviously, you're going to look for a little bit more than that. Let's see if I can still find it. I can't. I made the wrong note. Nevertheless, I think you kind of get the drift of where I'm going. So what I thought I would at least take a stab at is maybe coming up with a slightly more concise definition of what we think minor site plans might be. And then taking a stab at coming up with some requirements that I think would be more typical of what would be reasonable to ask of somebody under those circumstances making an application, if that makes sense. And then again, I think we would definitely have some, additional conversation around that. And so that's it. That's really my list. I'm sure there's more things out there. One of the things that I did think of incorporating into both of these, because it's come up a lot lately, less, not necessarily just in Litchfield, but in general, is outdoor seating. Oh, this is a section. Sorry about that. And I thought I would address outdoor seating, temporary outdoor seating, however we want to look at it, potentially both in this section, but I also thought I would address that into parking requirements as well. That's just kind of an aside, but I know that that's another issue that's come up. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on these, but if you think it makes sense to pursue it, I'd be happy to take a stab at it.
Jay, I know that we talked about, I think this was a discussion when Mel's came before us, was temporary structures.
Yes.
That may be something that we want to look at.
And I could absolutely look at that and perhaps look at it in this context.
Yeah.
Outside of agriculture.
Right. Because it says here seasonal or temporary structures erected for a period of not to exceed 180 consecutive days, disassembled on a seasonal basis. So I don't know if that's something we want to separate out from the agricultural piece, but
we certainly could. And although we haven't had applications for this yet, doesn't mean we couldn't. But other communities are also struggling is the wrong word, but trying to figure out how to address things like food trucks that may park on a site regularly. If it's in the public right of way, it's hawkers and peddlers. But some communities are seeing things like food trucks showing up in a parking lot, in a shopping center, say, on a regular basis. And they're trying to figure out how to deal with that. So that may be something else that we look at in this context, these kind of temporary uses that show up.
What's kind of interesting, you mentioned that there was something, and I don't know, was it at Pantry Pride? Someone had set up some sort of a food truck, but it was I think it was donuts, homemade donuts
At the
or something.
Christmas tree.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and we certainly have ones that are seasonal that show up.
Right.
So yeah, I could certainly incorporate that, those into this. And then again, we take a stab at it. I think this is kind of one of those where, we definitely have some conversation around it, because I'm sure as we start to put something together, more things are going to come to mind as we go along.
And maybe another thing too, to look at, and we just recently had this at deliberative, is the issue of solar panels. Might be something to visit at some point, just as a point of reference. Because I know that this did come up at deliberative. They were tried to propose an exemption on solar panels. But what are the regulations for solar panels in Litchfield, and how we might want to look at that? So that's something for.
Is that more of a building issue, an electrical permit and building issue?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, is it something that the planning board would need to address, and I don't know.
A brush up,
Yeah, a brush up maybe.
setbacks, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Something, yeah.
that's actually a really good point. I'd be happy to do that and pull together something for a future work session. There are communities that have adopted solar ordinances, where they've started to see these, what is allowed, what isn't. Especially where in some places people are starting to install not just solar panels on the roof, but freestanding structures. So yeah, I'd be happy to look at that.
Anybody have anything else for Jay?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have a question, but I think it's okay, but we've I just don't want to let this go by anymore, and I just want to make sure it gets put to bed on our zoning ordinances. If we can go to page 5 and 6.
Of the zoning ordinance?
Yeah. we get to the actual number. I think it's okay. It's 310 dimensional requirements.
In the zoning ordinance?
Yeah, in the actual zoning ordinance.
Okay, let me get there.
And I believe we're okay, but I just want to make sure for the future. So this has come
Oh,
up.
the where I had a stumbling block?
No, I think it was me, actually, on open space development, the frontage of the 90 feet and remember all of that. But I thought note 6, I don't know if these notes have changed. See how it's conservation office says see note 6, right, for frontage?
Yes.
So if you go down below to the next page, page 6, and you read the
Yeah.
note, I thought I read the client number 7 about the setback being, about the being 200 feet. So it says for number 6, go to this section 575 conservation open space for the actual dimensions, because I think we were confusing industrial with this open space. So if you actually now go to page 26, or if you want to look up ordinance 575.6, so it's telling me that if you're looking at dimensional spaces for open space, to go to this section 575.6. And you want 1C when you get there.
Okay.
All right, so when they came in about that barn in the front on 3A,
Yeah.
we would really go here. And this, I believe, and this is telling us the dimensions, right? That said go to note 6. Note 6 said to come here.
Yes.
All right, and I just want to read that. Let me catch up with you on page 26 there. Because we always said we were going to come back to revisit it, but it might be okay. I just want to make sure. So 575. Okay, so what is it saying as dimension here? C, right? So see about 3A there? So is it supposed to be 200 feet from the right of way? From what I'm
The
seeing,
setback is
150 feet.
250 feet.
Right, so we got 150 feet from the public way and then 250 feet, right?
250 feet. Yeah, yeah. If it's 3A, then it's 250.
Right. Okay, so I think we're okay. You said that chart was a little bit easy to misread because we were reading law number 7 up there when we really should have been here, but this actually made it worse for the client reading this section here for him. But I don't think we have an issue. I think I was looking at, he had to have 200 feet, but this is really saying 250 feet or 150, depending on where the right of way is. But
it definitely could be clearer.
it was one of those
Yes.
things we said we'd do as a cleanup exercise. I just don't know if you think it's clean enough the way it is. It kind of looks like it is, or do we want to say literally what land use, for industrial, for commercial, whatever it might be.
I mean, it does flow. It's just, you've got to always be making sure that when you're reading these, which has definitely thrown me, that you're looking at the notes that it applies to. So 7 only applies to the commercial districts, doesn't apply to the residential district. That threw me before. So that's just kind of, so it does work. It does make sense. It doesn't contradict itself. It's just a little bit, awkward to read. You've got to be really paying attention.
Yeah, when I first read this, I interpreted it as I went up to open space development and I saw, I'm going to go back there, whatever, the 90 feet, whatever.
Right.
Then I looked at notes 1 through 9 and I figured all of them had to also apply, So I was saying, oh, you don't meet number 7, when I
Exactly.
really should have been looking at that little
I thought the
6
same
at the
thing.
top. So you see
I
how
thought the exact same thing.
So I think that the document is correct if you remember to see that little 6 there and go down to note 6, which then tells you to go over to 575.61C. Then you're okay.
Then you're okay.
Yeah, I don't want to have a future client, because 200 feet here is very different than 200 feet when you get to the actual zoning ordinance,
Right.
Yeah. So I don't think we have to do a change. We just have to be very careful to not apply all the notes just the ones that are assigned to your certain cell up there.
Right.
Okay, so that's been on my list for months, so I'm gonna cross that off as done. If does everyone else agree it's okay the way it is, or do you want to be specific? I mean, it's pretty specific here in the chart, right? It tells you commercial, north commercial, highway commercial, residential, right?
Yeah.
I think it's straightforward, but it was always one of our cleanup issues. All right, cleaned up. Yeah, well, unless other people think it's not, but.
Anybody have any other thoughts? I mean, if not, then I'll certainly take a stab at these and, have some things that we can bring to the next work session.
Okay, that sounds good. If there's no other questions for Jay, I think that'll be good.
All right.
Thanks, Jay.
Absolutely. Then I am going to stop sharing.
Okay.
And we can see everybody now.
Except me.
Except
Well, yes.
And Curtis, right?
And Curtis.
and Curtis. Okay. Let's see. Here we are. Okay.
Are the weird noises that I'm hearing my audio problem, or are other people hearing it?
I hear it too.
Okay.
Yeah, I did hear it, so I don't know. So I guess that's it for potential regulation updates, Jay. Is that all you have?
Yes, so far at least, yes.
Okay, all right.
All I have.
Committee reports. Any reports from any committees? Do you have anything, Kim, for NRPC?
Yep, NRPC will meet Wednesday, March 17th, 2021, and the meeting information is on their website. And
That's now the 24th. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about the quarterly one. The
Oh, I'm sorry,
one
you said
is
March. Sorry about
March
that.
17th, yep. But yeah, you're right. The other one, yep. Heritage Commission will meet March 9th, 2021, and that will also be on the website for remote meeting information.
Let's see. Conservation is meeting next week, 4th of March. Lower Merrimack River Local Advisory Committee is also meeting on the 4th of March. That'll be by Zoom, that's my understanding. I think that's it for what I have for reports. Oh, the Capital Improvement Committee meeting has been postponed till after the election, my understanding. So there will probably be a meeting of that committee after the election is over. Approval of the minutes of January 19th, 2021. Did anybody have an opportunity to take a look at those and have any questions? And if there are no questions, I would entertain a motion to approve them.
So moved.
I have a motion. Kate, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Do I have discussion? All those in favor of approving the January 19th, 2021 minutes, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Anybody abstained? Motion passes 5-0-0. Okay. Just so you know, I did present the articles for the zoning amendments at deliberative. So those were presented to the town. And I also did the annual report for the planning board. I submitted that to Joan, so that should be published at some point. So however that works. Right. Any other business this evening? Joan, do you have anything?
No, don't.
Jay, do you have anything? Okay. Anybody?
Do you want
Yeah.
like an update on the Hudson Logistics Center?
Okay.
So the last meeting that they have that's up on their website to view was January 27th. They also had another meeting on February 10th. They continued the public hearing, but that's not up to view yet. So I haven't watched that one yet, but in Hudson, the Conservation Committee, they voted to recommend favorable action on the conditional use permit application with, they did say they had various stipulations, but they did recommend favorable action on it. The Board of Selectmen voted to grant allocation of sewer. Hillcrest and Amazon had a rep come in that explained, that a facility is built to accommodate the busy holiday season. And from what I understand, the traffic study was more on average loads. But the thing about the average daily traffic, so this is not including, November through January, is the average daily traffic is less than a place like Sam's Club, Pheasant Lane Mall. The Sagamore Park generates twice as much daily traffic as is proposed at the logistics center. And the majority of that traffic being at shift changes. So any other facility, large facility like that, you'll have a 30-minute window where everybody's trying to get out and everybody's coming in. But they've always maintained that the improvements that they're planning to make would improve the roads enough that it wouldn't be noticeable. So their stance is, if you don't notice, the bad traffic or shift changes at these other places, then if anything, it's only going to get better. And this is just their stance. I'm not trying to argue one way or the other. They did agree to a condition that the traffic assessment is done again before applying for a building permit for the third building. And other than that, it was public input. It was a lot of negative public input, a lot of repeat things, and a lot of people speaking on issues and questions that had been answered in previous meetings. So there wasn't a lot of new information from that public input. But so that's where we're at as of the 27th. And then as far as I know, no decisions have been made by the planning board. I don't know, Jay, if you've seen anything from Hudson Planning Board.
No, but I did mean to mention the next meeting is going to be the 24th.
Okay.
So it was continued to the 24th. The planning board does meet tomorrow night, but that's not going to be on Hillwood. So a week from tomorrow. And also, if anybody's deeply interested, the NHDES is going to be holding a public hearing on the wetlands permit on March 9th at 2, and that'll be a Zoom public hearing for anybody interested in that. So yeah, no final action yet.
Do you know if they publish those meetings after the fact, like how we can watch the Hudson board meetings and Litchfield board meetings after the fact?
You mean, do they publish the recording?
Yeah.
I believe they have the recording, so I'll double check. I thought they did, but I'll double check on that.
I think they do but you have to go to the Hudson, New Hampshire website. And I think it's under their public television or their access channel. I think they do put it on there. I think there's a list of.
Well, I mean the NHDS meetings.
Oh, I'll double check. Yeah, I'll double check on. I'll double check.
Okay, thanks. Because
I do have the meeting notice, so I'll be happy to forward that to everybody.
Thanks.
I know there was something that the DOT did not issue them a permit concerning the Sagamore Bridge or connecting to the Sagamore Bridge. That was something that I heard. I don't know if that's something that's,
I don't know that they applied for it, but they did say that the DOT had said that would actually impact the wetlands further. And that was a large reason why they weren't, and I don't think they were even entertaining the idea.
Yeah, that was something that some people on the town side really wanted to see or wanted to see them pursue. But DOT was not interested.
okay. Yes, Kim, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's just minor. Voting is also March 9th when the next Heritage Commission is. So if that meeting is canceled, which it probably will be, the next meeting will be April 13th.
Okay.
And then I also would like to thank John Brunel, who added the NRPC link to our town website. When you go up to Town Department's Planning Board, you will see a link for NRPC.
Which is great.
Great.
That's it.
Okay.
And speaking of voting, I should tell you, I am running for Budget Committee.
Oh,
So you may or may not be seeing more of me.
okay. Well, good luck. That's
Thanks.
great.
Yeah, as far as I know, there should be no conflict of interest for the planning board. Because if you'll still have me, I'd appreciate, or I'd really like to stay on.
That's great. Okay, well, good for you. I wish you the best.
So following up on the discussion about Hudson, many of you may have seen the article in the paper about the announcement of a multi-tenant cargo facility at the airport. It's 100,000 square feet of space for a number of tenants, and the purpose is to act as a distribution center for the area of approximately 20 miles around the airport. So in terms of traffic concerns, and we raised that with the Hudson logistics issue about just how much traffic would be added to 3A coming out of the airport. I think this is a further issue that is probably going to impact the traffic in the town. That lease apparently has already been signed by the airport. So I just note it as another development that may have some noticeable impact on traffic, especially on 3A.
Okay.
James, did you say 100 square feet?
100,000.
Oh, I was going to say, okay.
100,000 square feet. It looks like it's going to be just off the primary runway for easy access, so that the planes can pull right in. And they're advertising it as a convenient access to all the major interstates, 93, 93, Everett Turnpike, routes 101 and routes 3. So, despite the protestations to the contrary, I just don't think that these developments are going to have no impact on the town. I don't think Hudson is going to have no impact on the town. They can say that. I never found that to be credible. And I think this just adds to that concern.
With you.
Yeah, I hope I'm not trying to come across as for or against the project when I'm reporting on these.
No, you weren't at all.
Okay. Well, I think it's certainly, we will definitely keep it on the radar and as a, piece of regional impact and keep our ears open to that.
And I would assume that the airport development is in Londonderry.
Yes.
Right. Very true. So yeah, we'll definitely do that. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for the update. Okay. All right, any other business? Okay. So our next meeting will be
March
so March
2nd.
4th, 3rd, 2nd,
Second.
March 2nd, here. And I don't think I have anything else here. So we'll look forward to Jay and with the changes that he's going to make to those things we discussed this evening for the master plan and the regulations for town updates. I don't have anything else, so I guess I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Can
Okay,
I?
I have a motion, I have a second. Discussion? All right, all those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Abstained? Motion passes 500. So I guess Curtis will have to go before the Board of Selectmen. So we'd have to schedule something
Or
for
you,
that.
or you can, I don't know, find out from Troy, or if he has to go up in front of the board, or just recommend.
Or just recommend?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay. Well, I guess we can find that out then. Very good. All right, well, thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. Thank you, members, and pleasure as always. And we will be back here March 2nd at 7 p.m. And if you're into Mardi Gras, happy Mardi Gras today. We will see you in March. So everyone be well, be safe, and we'll see you soon.
Have a good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Have a good night.